All right, so now we get to the really interesting part about alt text, captions, and titles. And this is not just an anecdote. This is something that Google has been explicit about over and over and over again. Hey, so if you're watching this video, you're probably a little bit confused with how SEO and images work together. Like, what is alt text? What is a caption? How big do my images need to be? All those questions will be answered in this video. Hey, before I continue, my name is Yerain. I do videos on SEO, social media, web development, web design, stuff like that. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, consider subscribing and hitting the like button so other people can see this content. All right, so before I go any further, I just want to answer this question. Do you need images on your blog or website? The answer is yes. Yes, you do. Now, hold on. You don't really need to have them. Google will still index a website without images. However, you're going to miss out on a big opportunity to show up on Google Discover and on Google News, because any website can show up on Google Discover and News for whatever article. It's just kind of up to Google to pick and choose, but it will not show something that does not have a featured image, at least a featured image. Now, with that said, that might not be as important for Google News, because Google News does pull out different things from the article and may show that as a featured image, but Google Discover definitely wants you to have told them that this is the featured image that I want you to show. And of course, obviously, the image has a chance to show up on the image surface of Google. So that's, you know, extra traffic right there. And also, Google is in the middle of a weird transition where they're actually going way more into visual search. So, you know, holding out your phone, taking a picture of something and searching that way. So they're doing a lot more effort to understand what an image contains in it and how a user can find things through visual information. So images are going to play a very big and important role in SEO moving forward. All right, so a couple of best practices for images. Don't use random images. You don't want to just use a random image to satisfy a SEO tool on your WordPress website or something like that. They have to be relevant to the actual image. You risk confusing the user and just getting them upset if you're not talking about what's shown in the picture. All right, so how do you actually get images for your blog or website? So you can use a couple of things like free tools like Unsplash or Pexels.com, and there's a ton of them. I'll show some of them right now. And you could also use paid tools like iStock or Adobe Stock. Adobe Stock is the one that I personally use and I really love it. It is a monthly subscription and you get like 10 photos a month or something like that. Now, I do want you to consider this. This is important. Google rewards uniqueness. Google rewards things that are new and fresh and not reused a million times. Imagine you plagiarize an article, right? You don't want to do that. Google will know that I found this earlier and you're claiming that this is new, but I already have this in my index. So with that said, Google really loves unique things. So keep in mind that when you're using a stock image, especially a free stock image, Google will know that your article or website is just reusing images that are all over the internet. So if you're thinking about using stock images, consider that they're going to be used. A lot of other websites are using those already, especially the free images. So keep that in mind. If you're going to use images, think about the hierarchy. Free images are at the bottom because everyone's able to use them. Paid images, they're a lot less likely to be used because there's a barrier of entry. So if you can use a paid image, I'd recommend that. But the best image to use, period, is with your phone. As a matter of fact, earlier this year, Google announced in their product update that they were rewarding websites that were taking original images with their phones or digital cameras. It doesn't matter, the device doesn't matter. The point is that you're taking the photo and not using the manufacturer's stock image or an image that you found on the internet. They know when it's a reused image because they have indexed it thousands and thousands of times. But your image with your phone or your digital camera will be completely unique. So if you can use that, go for that. Period. End of story. If you can take a photo with it, do that. Also, imagine like if you have a business, small business, and you have employees, you know, in the About Us page, don't find a stock image of employees in an office. Just go take a photo of your actual office. Unique images are better than stock images, period. And people can really feel that and see that. When someone's like completely lit and it looks like a studio, it just smells, well, it's cringy as hell and it just doesn't look very good. So use your own photos. Another thing I want to address is graphics. So you don't just have to use photos that are taken with like a camera. You can also use graphics. They're also images. The point is that they're images. All right? It doesn't really matter what file type they are. Google's indexing them as an image. So if you Google latest graphs of blank or something like that, you're not going to get a bunch of pictures of people, right? You're going to get graphical images. This is also indexed. So The key takeaway here is that just because your website doesn't have attractive, flashy, cool-looking images with a nice scenery in the background does not mean that you don't have an opportunity to upload some images to your website. Consider creating a graphic. It could be created on canva.com. It could be created in Illustrator. You could pay someone to do it, and just make that graph or something like that into just a PNG file and just upload it to your website. That's still an image, so don't sleep on graphic. All right, so with that out of the way, what exactly are the image file types that we have available on the web? So generally, you're going to come in contact with like 5 different file formats for images. So there's JPEGs, PNG files, WebP files, SVG files, and GIFs. And by the way, JPEGs and JPEG eggs are the exact same thing. They're just, I remember reading up on this because I was confused about it, but it's, long story short, there's a file extension that's .jpg, and then there's a file extension that's .jpeg, same exact thing. They're both JPEGs. Anyway, JPEGs are going to be used when you have an image that has a lot of detail and you want to retain that detail. That's most likely going to be a JPEG. That's all you need to know about JPEGs. They're a little bit higher file size because they do retain a little bit more data. A PNG file is a little different. Images can be used as JPEGs. However, they're really better suited for logos and graphics and things like that. And that's because they do have a limit to the amount of color that the file can actually take on. I think it's like 256 or something like that, but I could be mistaken. Anyway, they do have a particular quality that makes them extremely unique from a lot of other file types, and that is the ability to have a transparent background. So when you run into an image online or anywhere that has a transparent background, that's because it's most likely it's a PNG file, not a JPEG. So you're going to run into that with logos and other kind of graphics like that. They don't need to have a transparent background, but they have the ability to do that. WebP files are really interesting, are really unique, and they're brand new. So what they essentially do is they're just images that are compressed as much as they possibly can, and they're optimized really specifically for the web. I think Google created WebP files, and they're really annoying. If you ever tried to like save as or like drag and drop an image from a website onto your desktop, you'll see that WebP files just sometimes don't want to cooperate. And also, if you want to open them, it's just a whole nother hassle. But they do have the advantage of being a lot smaller than the other file type. Now, there's a lot of apps and plugins that you can use to turn your JPEGs and your PNG files into WebP format. However, I do want you to take note that if you do go down the road of converting all of your images into WebP, you're going to possibly mess with your server storage space. Now, a lot of people won't have trouble with this, but I did have an issue where I essentially created all my pictures into WebP files, and what it essentially did is duplicated all my images, which is not a big deal, but it increased the amount of storage that I was taking up on my server. So my hosting company contacted me and said, hey, you're taking up 80% of your server space. What gives? I'm pretty sure that the WebP files were a culprit. 99% of you won't have that trouble. Actually, 80% of you won't have that problem, but if you do, it could be the WebP files. SVG files you've probably ran into in one way or another. They stand for Scaled Vector Graphics, and they're used primarily in like Illustrator and things like that. And what the unique quality of SVG files is that you can scale and zoom in as much as you want, and the quality of the file is never diminished. So there's never a pixel that it has to zoom into because the graphic is created mathematically. So it has it's just math that it creates the line. So that's the uniqueness of a scaled vector graphic or SVG file, and they're used primarily, pretty much exclusively, in logo design. Now you can make art, of course, with SVGs, but really for the web we're going to see them more in logo design. And finally, a GIF file. So what exactly is a GIF file? A GIF is no more than just a bunch of images stacked up on top of each other, and there's something in there, I don't know exactly what it is, but it just tells the image to start playing really quickly. If you actually save a GIF file that you find anywhere on the internet and save it to your desktop, you'll open it up and see that it is just 25, 30, 50 images right behind, well, not literally behind, but they just flash. It's just images that flash. And because they're just images instead of videos, they tend to be a lot smaller in size. So that's why you'll see GIFs used instead of videos sometimes. One note that I do want to mention before moving on is that if you do end up using GIF files, keep in mind that they're going to be very distracting for people because they tend to endlessly loop. So people are going to be looking at that and maybe get distracted from the text. It might not be a problem, it might be a problem, just something to consider. All right, so now that we understand the primary file types that are available to us on the web, what are some things that we should consider before we upload our images to our website? One thing that I think so many people, it's really quite a shame, overlook completely when uploading any image is the file name. What is the name of the file itself? Not the alt text, not the title, not the description. We'll talk about that in a second. The file's name. So instead of the file being ds5 367213448-2.jpg and then taking that and uploading it to the website, why not just actually give the file a name? Remember that Google actually does read, and does in fact read, the file name, because when we look into our website and we take a look at the location of any file, the name of the file that you uploaded is attributed to that file. So this is something that can be scraped, it can be scanned, and it can be very beneficial for you to have some sort of semantic relationship to the article or just the image or something like that. So don't sleep on the file name. Please, please remember to edit the file name. Another thing you want to consider is the file resolution, how big and small the file is. I'm not talking about megapixels. I'm not talking about megabytes or gigabytes or kilobytes. I'm talking about the pixel width and height. So obviously an image that is 800 pixels wide is going to load faster and be more optimized for the web than an image that's 6,000 pixels wide. So before you upload your image, consider changing and adjusting the actual size of the image. WordPress by default will take your image and duplicate it or make like 3 different versions of it in different sizes so that it can serve that size depending on how big the screen is, as opposed to loading the full original size. That sounds good, and it is a good thing for SEO and web tech and all that stuff, but it also duplicates these files. It makes multiple versions of that file, so it also takes up a little bit more space on your server. There is actually a plugin that I use to limit the exact width of any file that I upload, because I personally don't have any images that are larger than 1200 pixels wide, because I want to keep a consistent size for every image. I don't want any images over, and also because doing this allows me to skip a couple of steps in compressing and stuff like that. So if you want that plugin, this is what it looks like. I'll leave it right there. This is what I use, and when I upload an image that's 2000 pixels wide, doesn't even register, it automatically shrinks it and then uploads it. All right, now we're talking about file size, how many megabytes the actual file is. Obviously, and this should be obvious, a larger file is going to load a lot slower than a very small file. So page speed is extremely important in 2022. Yes, okay, good, I got it. It's a new year. 2022 moving forward. And this is not just an anecdote. This is something that Google has been explicit about over and over and over again. That's part of what the core web vitals are. Part of it is checking how fast the page loads and if there's anything slowing it down, etc. So having a smaller image is going to help you with that. How do we compress an image? Here are a couple of different options that you can choose, a couple different services. I personally just use Tiny PNG. I just throw my images up there and it just compresses the image and it spits out a smaller image that retains all the quality. There is also a couple of other ones that you can use, but really most of them are all going to do the same thing. They're just going to take the file and make it a smaller file so that it's served to your user a lot faster. You can also use a CDN, a content delivery network, to speed up your image delivery. That also helps with page speed. That's out of the context of this video, but the point is that research CDNs and you'll find a number of businesses that'll host your images on their servers to deliver them faster. You also want to make sure that you're putting your image as close to the thing that you're talking about as possible, right? So you don't want to mention something on the top of the page and then have the image of that thing you're mentioning at the bottom of the page. Keep those things close, just kind of a rule of thumb. All right, so now we get to the really interesting part about alt text, captions, and titles. So let's start with captions. So captions are essentially the text that's going to go right under the image, and people are going to be able to see it and read it. Captions are great for scanning, so when people are scrolling down the page, they see an image, they just don't want to waste their time, they read that little bit of text under the image and then they keep scrolling down. It's really good for that. But also it just describes what the image is and what they're supposed to be looking at. And I think that's the key there, because sometimes you'll upload an image of a screenshot, for instance, like a screenshot of a website that you're referring to, you're talking about, but people don't really know what the website is, what.com. Like it might be just a screenshot of a section of the website. That's when you'll want to say, hey, this screenshot was taken from this place. Or if it's a statistic, maybe add the source. is New York Times or like CDC or something like that. That you can add that in the caption. All right, so moving on to alt text. Alt text is a thing that gets people so worked up, and I think it's really unnecessary. Adding the proper alt text to your images, while it is best practice, it is not going to shoot you up the ranks or anything like that. Alt text is really primarily used for screen readers, and when the image can't load properly, it'll display that text as opposed to the image to the user, so that there's something that the user can read when the image doesn't work properly. It's actually called alt text, right? Alternative text. So if the image isn't there, what do you want us to fall back on? Keep that in mind, because I think a lot of people don't know that that's what alt text stands for, alternative text, and they tend to overcomplicate it. But if you just think about, oh, it's the alternative. If this image does not load properly, then it just starts making a little bit more sense. Now, with that said, should you add alt text to your images? Absolutely. Every single one of them should have proper alt text. So what is good alt text though? Like, what are the things that I should add in my description, my alt text, right? A lot of people think that you should use keywords in your alt text, and while if you can get away with it, it makes sense, then that's perfectly great. Like if you're writing an article about red bicycles and your image is a red bicycle, it makes perfect sense for the alt text to contain the words image of red bicycle next to fire truck or something like that. There you put your keyword in there, perfect. But if it's a picture of a wrench because you're talking about how to fix bicycles, you don't just stick image of wrench, how to fix bicycles. Don't do that. And the reason I say don't do that, you can do whatever you want, but I'm saying don't do that is because you have the opportunity to use that image multiple times on your blog, the image of the wrench. So next time you use it, it's going to have a random forced keyword attributed to it when it just didn't need that at all. I say if it makes sense, put the keyword in your alt text, but if you don't have to. And I personally stay away from that so I can use my images multiple times. I mean, think about it. What are you going to do? Add a new comma and then add a keyword that you forced in there and then a comma, forced another keyword in the alt text, force another keyword on the alt text every time you want to use that same image because it's a perfect image that goes with like all the articles that you want to write about. It just doesn't make sense for me. So if it makes sense, use the keywords in your alt text, but don't force it. I'm actually really curious, you watching, are you adding or stuffing your keywords into your alt text, or are you just making them organic like I do? I want to know. Just let me know in the comments. I'd be excited. I read and reply to every comment, so do let me know your methodology. Alt text should not be 1 word, 2 words long. Keep it a nice long sentence. Don't add more than 1 sentence. It should be descriptive. It should be describing exactly what's on that image. Oh, and for that same reason, you want to make sure that you're actually grammatically correct. You want to make sure that you actually have real punctuation. I like to add properly like a period in my alt text, and I want to have it all sentence cased, and I want it to be able to be read properly because a screen reader is going to read it out loud. So if you have something that needs a comma in that sentence, add the comma because the screen reader is going to read it out loud. Now you'll notice that in some browsers like Chrome and a number of others, you'll hover over an image and it'll show you a little bit of text. That's actually the title tag. So that's one reason that you'd want to add a proper title along with alt text. There's also a little bit to be said about image structure data, something that Google wants to show your image properly on their service. But if you have Yoast or Rank Math, you're covered. You don't even have to worry about that. They'll automatically take your images, add the proper markup, and then you're good to go. Wow, that was a lot about images. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe so you can see other content just like this. I talk about this stuff all the time, so if you enjoy SEO, this is the place. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.